kind of got accustomed to jail. I was looking at 5 to 20 years. I'm like, I was on no bond. They wouldn't let me out. My family, when I'd call them, they'd be like, Sam, all you got to do is go to treatment. We'll get you out of jail. All you got to do is be willing to go to treatment. Are you willing to go to treatment? I'm like, no, I don't need treatment. I don't need treatment. Y'all are crazy. This is somebody else's fault. This is a big misunderstanding. I wanted to take no ownership of my behaviors, no ownership of my actions. It was always somebody else's fault because an addicted individual plays the victim like nobody's business. And if I'm going to play a victim, there's got to be a villain. It was everybody else's fault except mine. I didn't want to take any ownership. So my family had started to get some work done at this time. They started doing some education of their own. What is our role in handling our addicted loved one? What do we do differently? They started getting educated. They started getting some solution. They started getting some guidance from professionals that had been before them, that had lived my life and are now on the other side of it, and they're giving guidance to families. My family latched onto that and started doing things a lot differently. They said, we're not getting you out of jail unless you're willing to go to treatment. I finally said, you know what, y'all, I'm ready to get some help. Sure enough, they get an attorney, they get a bond hearing, and I was released to go to treatment. And if I left treatment, I went directly back to jail. I had a lot riding on me getting well. I had every reason in the world to get well. My family sent me off to a 90-day program down in the deep south. Gave me a lot of education. I sat through a lot of lectures, distracted myself with a female. Went through court, got dropped to a simple assault, was free to go. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing drugs again. I'm not doing this. I remember riding down the road one day in my town. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I had been I'd been abstinent for about 95, 100 days. And I said, you know what? I had this idea. I said, you know what? I wonder what the guys are doing down there back across the tracks. I want to go see what they're doing. I want them to see that that I'm not really a crackhead. I want them to see that I'm a likable guy and that I can hang with them and not smoke crack. Family got wise. They took me to court, took my kids. They allowed me visitation. They didn't take my kids. I voluntarily gave them up to them, And I was in such delusion. I thought that, because I could see them from time to time, that I was still being a good dad. And it actually worked out great for a drug addict because I could still see my kids from time to time, but I still had a lot of time to do what I felt like I needed to do. And what that really amounted to was isolating from the world, smoking crack cocaine every single day and taking methadone on top of that. Waking up in the morning and you got the four horsemen staring at me: terror, frustration, bewilderment, and despair. Waking up in the morning feeling like the whole world's going to cave in around me. Waking up in the morning bound and determined that I'm going to be a good boy today. I'm going to be a good man. I'm going to be productive. Walking outside, getting in the car, telling the wife that I'm going to just go get some milk. I'll be back in a little bit. And 3 days later, I'm coming out of a blackout in a tobacco barn, not knowing where I was or what had happened or how long I'd been gone, with a missing persons report filed on me. And I'd show back up and my family would be like, hey, don't you think you need to go back to treatment? I'm like, nah, I'm good. I got it. I got this. The day came where I got arrested on Main Street in my hometown, and it seemed like everybody I knew at the time was riding down the street looking out the window as the blue lights were behind me in the Hardee's parking lot, and I got arrested for possession of cocaine and possession of marijuana. And I went to court, had to pull another 27 days. And the first time I went to jail, I came out of there when they opened that door and let me out and gave me my civilian clothes, and I had somebody waiting on me with a Mountain Dew and a pack of smokes. And I'm looking back behind me going, I'm never coming back to this jail again. I'm never going to do that. And yep, here I am again, going to jail. We're showing up to my probation officer's office, looking all gray and scaly, missing a tooth, coming in, giving fake urines, trying to show her how good I was doing. And my living situation, I'm living in a single-wide trailer at this point with a hole in the floor, and I couldn't pay rent on that. I had stolen cable and could see my kids when my family told me I could see my kids, and was basically unemployable. I had an appointment with my probation officer, and I went in that day and expecting to lay my head down in Virginia that night. And I walked in and had a condom full of my son's urine to give her and tell her how good I was doing. She said, come back here. I got somebody who wants to talk to you. I walked through the door, and there's two deputies. There's an old interventionist, and there's my family. And my family didn't say a word. The two deputies didn't say a word. And this old interventionist said, Sam, you're dying of a cocaine addiction. You've got two options today. You can go with me and go to treatment. You're going to go to Texas and go to inpatient treatment for at least a year. Or you can go with these two deputies and you're going to go to prison today. Which one do you want to do? And I had to think about it. What I was really thinking was, what type of options do I have here? What is an angle I can work? Like there's got to be other options. Like these aren't the only two. How can I finagle my way out of this? And when I came to the conclusion that there were only indeed two options, jail or go to treatment, I chose treatment. Waved goodbye to my kids once again out of the back of that interventionist Lincoln. And off I went. And I laid my head in Texas that night. And the treatment center that I went to was like the Navy SEALs of treatment centers. They wouldn't take you unless you had been to multiple treatment centers. It was a facility that they say they catered to the reluctant to recover. That's how they referred to me. That I was not the chronic relapser because I'd never been emotionally well to relapse back into my illness, but I was reluctant to recover. They held me highly accountable. There was no discharge date. I hated every second of it for a long time. I was fighting it. And I tried my same old shenanigans of, hooking up with a female when I was in there to distract myself from the uncomfortableness of my current situation and my misery. And they saw that coming. They knew that was going to happen, and they were planning for it, and that landed me on a no female contact contract, they called it, for 7 months. I was in that inpatient treatment center for 2 weeks shy of a year. I worked all 12 steps. Had some great clinical work done. My family followed directions. My family set boundaries, held boundaries with me, and were living their own life. If I went to an outside meeting, or I couldn't talk to any of the females there, I couldn't look at them. If I went to an outside, recovery meeting and a female sat down beside me, I'd have to get up and leave. I had to get up and move. And I felt like stranger danger, but what that turned out to be was one of the greatest things that had happened to me, because I was left with me. I was left with my mess, and I had no outside distractions. And it had been suggested to me that I start praying, and I'm like, man, what you talking about? Only prayers I know I learned at the pancake suppers or what little bit of church I went to as a child or paid attention to. And I'm trying with the these, the thys, and the thous, and nothing would come out, or I'd start thinking about women or fishing or getting the hell out of this treatment center. I didn't know what, and it was just, man, just pray, help me. I'm like, man, I've done these prayers before. Because I remember one time my father-in-law said, boy, all you got to do is go down there and get saved. Take care of this addiction. So I went to church that night, and they called us down to the pulpit and prayed over me. And I said, all the prayers that I needed to say. And I went out and I got high that night because I had no relationship with my Creator. I was just doing what somebody said do. There was no meat behind it. There was no meaning behind it. It was a foxhole prayer. When you take drugs and alcohol away from an individual that's truly addicted, that has the illness, and you take all the other distractions away, and you remove their options, like I had no options. I could walk out that door and go straight to prison. My family wasn't going to bail me out anymore. It created desperation in me. I had to feel this immense pain. I had to hurt. I had to really, really hurt in order for me to really understand the common denominator in all my problems, and that was me. It wasn't the police. It wasn't my family. It wasn't the cards I was dealt. It was me. Nothing I've done has worked. I don't have any drugs and alcohol in my system, and I'm feeling worse. I'm not feeling better because I'm stuck with me. And it was then that I had that profound awareness that the drugs and alcohol were never my problem. They were what I was using as a solution to my problem. When you take drugs and alcohol away from me, I'm going to get worse because you've taken the only solution I knew how to deal with life away from me. I surrendered. And it looked like me walking out of treatment trying to finagle my family into bringing me home. I figured, hell, there's no way they're going to let me be on the street 1,500 miles away from home. I walked out of treatment and called my dad because my dad was the last holdout. My dad was one that I just knew was not going to leave me hanging. He never had. He was always a softy. So I walked out of treatment one night after meds, went to I'll never forget it. I was in Austin, Texas on Lamar Boulevard at a payphone, had one little calling card. Called my dad. I said, Dad, I left treatment. All I need is a bus ticket. I'm going to come home, turn myself in, and I'll figure it out from there. I'll go to prison, and I'll figure it out from there. He said, I'm not doing anything for you. He said, I love you. But anything you're going to do, you're going to do it on your own, and you're going to do it down there. You're not even welcome back in this state. Love you, click. Love you, bye, click. Got no options. And I had been praying, man, help me. God, please help me. Please help me. Please help me get out of this mess. I said, I don't need my dad. I'm going to go and I'm going to rent a car. I'm going to drive back to Virginia. And I had been given a picture of my two sons laying beside each other. I had 2 kids at this time. They were snuggled up in the bed together, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. That, man, it's not all about you anymore, Sam. Look what you've got here. Look at these 2 kids that are snuggled up in the bed, and all they want is a dad. And all they want is to be safe. And all you want is to be a good father. You want to be a good, productive member of society. You want to be a good person. But you can't get out of your own way. What the hell are you doing, Sam? God spoke to me that day very profoundly through that picture. It wasn't through words, but it was through that picture. And it was, you got to go back to treatment. It's not about you anymore. And I went back to that treatment center, and I had a completely different experience. I had surrendered. I'd given up. I'd given up the fight. I'd given up the conflict. And I started following directions. And I embraced it. And I got a sponsor, and they told me, they said, man, from now on, you're going to let God handle your business. And what he does with your business is none of your business. Are you down for that? I said, yeah, man, that makes sense to me. Like immediately when I gave up, when I'm sitting there looking at that picture and I made the decision that I got to go back to treatment, I felt relief. That surrender gave me relief. Like the war stopped. And then I went in and I started doing some inventory, trying to figure out, like, man, what is making me tick? What's with all these resentments and these fears and this self-centeredness and these character defects? Like, what's up with that? What is causing all of that? And what I came to find is like, man, I'm a fake. Like, nothing about me is real. I don't even know who I am. If you would have asked me who I was, I'd have told you what I did. I'm a logger. I'm a father. I'm this and that. I'm a husband. I'm in rehab. I had no idea who I was. I was empty. There's this thing called the 5th step where you admit to God, yourself, and another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. And there were some things that I had planned on carrying to my grave. Me being molested was one of them. But I wanted relief. I wanted to not go back to smoking crack cocaine. I made a decision that I was going to let God handle my business, and what he did with my business was none of my business. I made a decision to do that, so I had to follow that up with action, and that meant follow direction. So I trusted God. And I went to another human being and I bore all my secret. I let it all out. And where I was expecting them to run away in terror, he said, yeah, that happened to me too. So what? Now what? What else you got? Like, shoot. The sky didn't fall. The world didn't end. And I felt relief. And then I got to looking at my character defects. Selfishness. Self-centeredness, fear, entitlement. Like, it had nothing to do with drugs and drinking. It had nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. That was my solution. And if you take that away from me, now what am I going to do? Now what's my solution to deal with this unmanageability going on inside me? I got some good trauma work done. God put that woman in my life and that group of people, and she dug down into because I became willing to let my guts be dumped out in the floor emotionally, rearranged and put back in. I was an open book at that point. I had some relief, and I had gotten addicted to that relief. I wanted more of it. Like, hey, here you are. Here's me. This is what I've got. Do with it what you will. She worked some magic on me, and it's like, I was carrying around all these mistaken beliefs, man. They talk about in the book 4 Agreements that most of us walk around this world asleep, dreaming we are awake. And that is so true. But I had started to wake up. She challenged one belief system that I had. One belief, one mistaken belief, and smashed it. And I don't know how she did it, but she did it. She smashed that belief that I had. And I had this like aha moment where I'm like, wait a minute. If that belief that I've been carrying around for all these years is not true, then what others do I have that aren't true? And it just, the floodgate opened up of these belief systems and allowed new beliefs to come in. And it is there that I found my authentic self. It is there that I found who I was. And I left treatment about 2 weeks shy of a year. I'd worked all 12 steps. I'd had an experience. I'd had some good clinical work done. My family was still done. I had $150, a pair of cowboy boots, and a bag full of clothes. My family was done because, see, I'd left treatment against staff advice. Typically, that doesn't work out well. But I'd had an experience. I'd felt freedom. I'm starting to feel stagnant. I'd been in treatment so long. And, I knew that going home wasn't an option. I didn't even want to go home, but I wanted to be out of that program. I get into a sober living in Austin, and I'd called my family, and they were instructed by the treatment program to not take my calls, not enable me, and I get it. I do the same thing with the families that I work with now. They did the right thing. They had to see what my feet were doing, not what my mouth was saying. Watching an addicted individual is like watching a movie in a foreign language that you don't understand. If you're paying attention to what I'm telling you when I'm in active addiction or I'm in early sobriety, you're not really going to know what the world I'm doing. But when you watch what my feet are doing, you know what's going on. If you listen to what the people are saying, you'll never follow along with the movie. You'll never know what's going on. But if you watch what the actors are doing, you watch what their feet are doing, you watch the movements, you pay attention to the actions, you can pretty much figure out what's going on in the movie even though you don't speak the language. And addicted individuals the same way. One of the greatest gifts that was given to me was the gift of I had to do it on my own. Got a job on a party barge on Lake Travis, Texas. And when people found out about that, and see, people ask me about triggers all the time. Like, man, you got to change people, places, and things, and you can't be around alcohol, and you can't be around drugs, and it leads people to think that we're going to have to isolate ourselves from the world. Sobriety is about freedom. Sobriety is about going where any free man can go. Sobriety is about being a part of the world and showing up. It's not about isolating because it's got nothing to do with the drugs. It's got nothing to do with the drink. It's about the why. It's about how am I? What's my internal condition? Because I treated this internal condition through a lot of hard work, the obsession to drink and do drugs went away. Never since that day has it come across my mind that I thought it would be a good idea to smoke crack cocaine. Not even once. I'm crystal clear on that. I have freedom today. My family was like, man, there he goes again. But I knew I had some freedom. Like I knew that I was a changed man. And the original treatment manual tells me that, I can go where any free man can go as long as I am in fit spiritual condition. There's no triggers. Like I should be able to go where anyone can go. Everyone that we took out on that barge, wasn't sober. We took out sororities, fraternities, nudist colonies, roller derby girls, lesbian, you name it, we took them out. There's a part in the original treatment manual that says that we will recoil from drugs and alcohol as we would a hot flame. That's a promise. They say that's a promise. That will happen. If you do the work and you're desperate, and you truly do the work, that will happen in your life. And I experienced that. I was pulling security. I was on a double decker of a party barge, and I was at the bottom of the steps, and I think it was a sorority we had taken out, and this girl, and they had a bunch of Jello shots, and I'd never had Jello shots, believe it or not. Like I like Jello, but I'd never had a Jello shot. And this girl, and at the time I liked women. Women had been my trouble since I found out they weren't men. That's a fact. And I like Jello, right? So I got two things coming at me that I just adore. And this girl is coming down the steps. I'll never forget it. I was looking up the steps, and this girl comes. She got two Jello shots in her hand. And they jiggling, and she's got a bikini on, and everything's jiggling, and she's bebopping down the steps, and everything is just everything. And she comes to me, and she says, take a shot with me. And I recoiled from it as from a hot flame. I said, ma'am, no thank you. I'm good. Let's leave Lake Travis as good and as clean as we found it. Please use the trash receptacles and enjoy your stay. I'm good. She said, okay, and went on back up the steps. And it was at that moment, as silly as it sounds, I knew I was going to be all right. Freedom, change, man. And I had this pull inside of me. It wasn't of me, but it was inside of me. It didn't originate from me. And at this point, I had developed a close personal relationship with my Creator. I was having wonderful experiences. I was experiencing freedom. And there was this thing inside of me that's like, man, you need to work with other people. Because I remember when I was on that airplane with that interventionist and I was peering through these bloodshot eyes at him going, man, I'd like to do what he does one day. Having no idea that I would ever pull it off. This treatment center opened up out in Austin, Texas. They were looking for some new help. And they gave me a shot of being a tech. And I was like a duck in the water. It was what I was created to do. I found, which I didn't even know I was looking for, I found in my life my purpose. That is a gift of transformation that I never saw coming, that I would find my purpose. And it is a wonderful thing when you realize your purpose, that you know what you're supposed to be doing. And I went to work at that treatment center and I was good at it. They let me run some groups. They let me run some family groups. The more they let me do, the more I wanted to do. I was working double shifts and I was in my element. I thought that I was supposed to be a lumberjack for the rest of my life. Now that I'm on the other side and I have some spiritual freedom and some spiritual awakening and then having profound spiritual experiences, I've got some authenticity and I'm genuine. And I'm like, I know what a real man is. A real man is grounded. A real man is true. A real man is authentic. No matter what anyone else says.